Alright, so I didn't feel like writing all this out, so just make a video about it. We're going to be looking at Chaos Eater, which is like one of the best maps, period. I really like it. Pocket very heavily popped off with this one, and it's also like a really clear showcaser of everything that you should be doing just in general or thinking about when you're making your own maps. So to start here, you can clearly see doing axes. Alright, like the most basic. You have your little start melody or drums, just make it follow this basic line, and then as soon as he wants to transition, he's trying to make the next sort of line that he makes go like here. What he does is he uses the circle pattern, and what this does is it goes from following this axis to transitioning into this. So now you have sort of this gentle transition from just this line to the line that we want just there. And this is just sort of an aesthetic overlap here with like a 60-degree or 70-degree angle between them, and it just looks nice when you do that in general. So if you look again, he makes it even stronger by not only having like this sort of curve, he also adds another curve that leads in from here, and this sort of relationship down here where it's blanketing itself just looks nice, makes it look good. And then again, we want to go to this line, and this new sort of slider that we have down here actually again helps transition into that even more. So now we have a super clean transition from just the start axis to this diagonal, and then right away it transitions again into that same sort of angle that we were on before, but now it's just in a different spot. So he made himself, he gave himself a lot more space, because here he would have been stuck, he wouldn't have been able to fit everything going back, and then had he not done this, just putting this here would look a little bit awkward compared to here, because now instead of it being a clear line, sort of just take these two and then clear away all the work that he did, and we just stack them on top of each other and we make it like this. And let's pretend that instead of doing that he went forward a bit, so like this. Now it's not as clear that it's a line, right? Because we have the main axis that we were talking about earlier, but then later on, if for instance we had just kept on going here and not done that transition to the diagonal, and we just went straight here, it's not as clear that it's kind of two separate patterns or two separate axes. It kind of just looks like everything is a box around here. Like this whole pattern makes it a little box, and then that's what your eye catches instead of how clearly linear everything is. And then again, I think I've told you guys that this just looks really nice if you take this, rotate it by 60 degrees, and just make it go through it like just a basic sort of relationship like this. It doesn't have to be two big sliders. This could be just this. It just looks nice and it's effective, and it's a really easy way of. And then again, this is just following. So he sets up that blue axis that we showed, this one, and then he goes back into these, and then when he feels like he doesn't have enough space, he just goes straight back into the blue axis, except this time it's slightly shifted with these. Again, this is just, I think, like 30-degree rotations, but it follows a line. You can see it makes a line, and then when he's sick of it, he uses this to transition into another axis. And this is a little bit subtle, but you've got this, you've got this, and then let's change the color of this one to red. Sort of a 90-degree here. He actually uses this little slider, as you can see, to imply motion or imply the axis in this direction. It's really subtle. I don't even know if this was fully intentional, but it works that way because it sort of leads in from what we had before here and then just smoothly transitions that 90 degrees. So everything looks really clean. And again, we keep going and then instantly switch back to, oops. You switch back to this axis with just a gentle transition like we had before, except this time it's lower spacing. And then, actually, never mind, just kidding. Instead of going back into, oops, instead of going back into this line, what he does is he uses this slider that's on that line to set up a new axis that goes this way. And then this is just kind of, let's see, a way of spicing it up, I guess. Because if we make it here, having stuff that kind of shoots off of it, like builds out from it, just kind of, it looks nice. Just a way of making that sort of linear pattern like this, a little bit more interesting instead of just stacking them here. And then this is more of the same. I think this is just symmetry here. It looks nice. It's also symmetry later on. So this is just sort of a nice cute little pattern, but it'll also make a lot more sense as we get a little bit further in. Again, similar pattern here, not quite the same as what we had on the right hand side, but it's the same sort of axis here. Everything follows this line. Again, this transitions into there, this goes into here. I think I've shown you guys this diagram before of how you can make curves sort of lead into an axis. That's just what he's doing. Then, straight away, to add a lot of contrast here, instead of following the axis that we were, like sort of the angles, sorry, that we were going on, like this, this, or maybe this and this, we have a stream. It's something new, something exciting. So again, following the symmetry gimmick, he just throws it down in the middle and he makes it perfectly flat, so it stands out really, really hard, because you're not really expecting something to be perfectly flat, and you're also not expecting a stream, so it's just insane contrast. And you can do this without having insane spacing. Like, he could have thrown it up here and you would have had spacing or emphasis through spacing, but here you don't need to. You can just make it a nice little pattern here and continue the the whole pattern across the bottom here, and use the emphasis through visuals and rhythm. And then again, just more of that same axis, just basic stuff here. Just lead into it, imply that everything's leading into here. This is honestly, I mean, it's still following the axis, so like it looks nice, but this is a little bit of a blunder because of the, oops, because of all the space down here that he's kind of wasting. It's not quite as clean. It looks a little bit empty. And then it's just a transition. This one isn't the, it's not as clean of a transition as before, where he had the three. Else. Here, we're going three curves that are implying that there should be something here, like a focal point, because they all kind of lead into here, right? So in that focal point, he uses that, instead of putting something there, makes an axis that leads into it. But he doesn't just put like a slider there. If he had a big slider here, it would just kind of look terrible, because while there is the slider body there, there's not actually like an object at the focal point, so it just looks like you're blanketing nothing. He puts this and this right beside it. It's not actually quite there, but it still works. Maybe if you had done that, it would be nice, but he puts it close enough to the focal point where it still kind of fills it. It's the same sort of concept as, for instance, if we have our slider and then our focal point, instead of perfectly blanketing it like this, we can just raise it a little bit. Just adds a little bit more interest, makes it look. And then more of this. We've already talked about it. He just keeps going with the sort of vertical, or not vertical, horizontal, horizontal, and then these sort of axes on the sides. And this is just what the entire intro is. Again, it's all setting up for the middle part here, where he'll start going into like heavy symmetry. And it's just here so that that part isn't quite as, not off-putting, but not quite as surprising. It has setup, and it makes sense for it to be there. Then instead of having curves here, you just use a straight line. This is just basic sort of focal point stuff. You have, you know, your little shapes going on around here. Pentagon, squares. This is just kind of really elementary. I don't think I need to. This is good. For instance, you have this very spaced pattern, very spaced pentagon. To transition out of it, you use the last point as a focal point right here, and then you just do a basic 1, 2, 3, and then again use that to transition into a new axis. So now you're kind of using like both of the basic ways of thinking about patterns, where you've got focal points and you transition it into a right, and then again this also works in the same way. It leads into here. More of that bread and butter axis down here. I guess a big emphasis, or you didn't feel like mapping this part. And then this is, again, I think you can quite clearly see what this is, just vertical axis right there. And here, more axes, more axes. I love axes. Everything. It's following nice little curved lines, not curved lines, angled lines. And then when he wants to add some sort of contrast, for instance here, you've got the little wubs as opposed to what was happening before. Sort of kicks. And then the 3 whoop whoop whoops. Again, he uses the exact same, not really gimmick, but emphasis style as here. So he'll put them at the bottom on a completely straight line across the entire screen. Curves. And this doesn't work often, like just sort of this relationship in terms of patterning, where you got, oops, you have curves and they're stacked on top of each other like this. That doesn't work often, only when you know what you're doing. I wouldn't suggest copying this section. Maybe if you wanted to do this, you could add one of them that went the other way. But it works here. Then you just have a little blanket, 1, 2, 3, on here, and then boom, transition into another new line. And it's just, again, super clean. Everything will work so well. Transitions into axes are so clean. And same emphasis. Streams that lead off of the curves. It's, same part of the music. And then also leads into an axis. Great way of doing that. You have all this. You have that same 60, I think this one's actually 30 degrees right here. And it just looks really nice again. That simple 30-degree overlap or that 60-degree overlap with these two. Just super easy. This is just great. We slowed down the map. make the momentum a lot slower. And then we suddenly explode back out to put a huge amount of emphasis on this. And then at the same time, you have anti-emphasis because now this is sort of spaced out further than everything else after the explosion of this stream and then these two kicks here. Everything should be speeding up, and then boom, you make it even more intense by having to be super slow. And then here is the sort of main symmetry section. Again, stands out visually because, you know, it's literally just sort of circular patterns instead of, and it's also not using the focal point in the middle, it's just leaving it empty, which is sort of unexpected. You might sort of think, oh, I can just transition something out from here, but he doesn't do that. And then he also makes it stand out through rhythm choice by only mapping the sort of gongs in the background like these. Just got interesting jump patterns. And then we go on to a new section. Again, make it stand out. Have, instead of the horizontal streams, we have these new vertical ones. But if you notice, it's still kind of following what we set up before by having everything on the bottom to make it stand out. But instead of it being on the bottom going across, it goes through here. So we're still using those ideas that were set up at the start of the map, but now we're building on them. Just keeps going. And then again, goes. Boom. Effortless transition into just rhythm, emphasis through it standing out visually. Where everything's going either straight up or straight down, and it's all following this little line here. Again, now it's at the bottom, which is what we had before, but it doesn't really matter whether it's at the bottom or the top now. Just the idea of things going fully across the screen is what matters. And then right here, to make these stand out, it's a new sound. He still makes them follow the sort of gimmick that we have of everything flowing across the screen horizontally. But, for instance, in some of your maps I see, when you want to make things stand out, you just completely separate them from what pattern you had before, even if it makes sense to include them. And here's a way of doing that, where now these stand out because they're on a different angle. This isn't like everything we had before, but they're still in the gimmick. They're still semi-vertical. Instead of just being perfectly vertical, they're just on a little angle here. And they're still going horizontally. So they're incorporated into the overall pattern, but they also stand out. You don't have to, for instance, I don't know, if some of you might have done this, you probably would have either, like, okay, you're better at mapping than this, but you could have, like, made this sort of pattern where you have symmetry and it goes across the screen like this, and this is less strong, I think. While this stands out more, it doesn't fit into the overall pattern, and it's harder to do. Again, more symmetry. Here we have emphasis on not incorporating things into symmetry. For instance, this whole pattern sets up that this triangle is actually going to be copy-pasted onto the right-hand side, like this, but it's not. Instead, he puts something right in the middle, where you would expect this last point to be. He doesn't put that there, he moves it here, and now this stands out a lot more. This is just circles, honestly. It's following an axis right here, and it makes a lot of sense. You got focal point stuff with a nice little emphasis there in the middle. And then this is so clean, oh my god. So you have the same sort of axis transition as we had right at the start of the map, where we have this kind of thing. it's also at the same time following an axis overall. And then at the same time, he uses this to transition into a focal point pattern, focal point in the middle with this. And if you notice, if we just kind of extend this line, then extend this, we have like a 60 degree, 30 degree, and then like 60 degrees. And then these yellow lines all still work with the blue line. It all still fits with the axis. And it makes a sort of attractive overlaps if you extend them out. This is insane. This pattern is crazy. And then again, you don't fill the open space in the middle because you kind of fill it with this by just having something in there that I guess can overlap with this little circle. If we can't consider that the focal point, we kind of fill it, like low key, but you don't necessarily have to if you have a reason not to. Emphasis by putting something straight in the middle. This is copy pasted from before. This is just circles again. And then, boom, stream. This is just rotating triangles. This before, it's not that complicated. It's good. We've got, you know, just nice little leads into there, into the middle, as things sort of get calmer and calmer. And this part's cool. Have a 1, 2, 3. You're sort of building things up, they're getting crazier and crazier. Following an axis, of course, and then you're kind of making this little shape, this wave that intersects it. And adds more interest through that. And then once he's sick of doing that and he wants to transition away, you have the same build-up that you had before with this, but then he keeps going instead of just being the two. Now you're building out, the spacing getting more and more intense, and then axis and the square. This really attractive looking slider shape, which again follows an axis, which is part of why it looks so nice. You have your main line that everything is based off of, and then things just kind of intersect it, and they work with it. If we go here, it leads into it. It just looks really nice with the overlaps and the sort of lead in right there. And then we get the main part of the map. Again, just add intrigue through making things go completely horizontally across. And then when you're sick of that, transition into what we set up before, this axis. And this is just focal point stuff, curves. This looks really nice, it's nicely blanketed. And then this is similar to that pentagon that we had before. Things just get more and more intense as you build out, and then he does fill the space in the middle with this sort of pattern from Raruchi's Chirality. Except these look really bad, if I'm being perfectly honest. This is like the only part of the map I don't like, the specific shape. They look so rushed, but whatever. It's like one of the few mistakes in here. We sort of have this same build-up / slow down concept as we had before, except now there's again, like if I'm not drawing the lines, they're still there. Everything follows an axis. Everything is always following an axis. It's not just randomly when he decides to do it. All of these patterns are based off axes. I'm just not going to draw them. Like here I can. Yeah. This one's straightforward. This one straightforward, and then it also blankets it. Just super. Again, that yellow line that goes straight across, just for more emphasis. That gimmick that you set up right at the beginning with this stream. And he's just incorporating that. Again, same thing. And this axis, again, he just keeps going back to the same things that he set up before, but making them more interesting by having like more creative ways of putting patterns in here. Here, you can sort of analyze it a little bit more. We have this little angle that looks nice, and then we also have a curve set up by these circles that leads in here, and then also leads into this same axis down here. From here. This is just nice. It's just literally a Control C, Control V, Control H. Again, this is really obvious what's happening. Even like, I don't have to draw anything, you can figure out. This one's a blunder. The curves work with each other, like this, but it does not work with this slider. It doesn't, it's like okay, but if I'm nitpicking, it's just not very, doesn't correlate as strongly with this slider and the emphasis of having something straight down the middle, as well as a lot of the other stuff here. And then this slider also just looks kind of ugly, I'm sorry. Focal point stuff, you don't fill it. Axes. Here we've got sort of a double thing going, where each individual sort of set of these back and forths and the straight slider is going across here, but the overall pattern is on that line. And then boom, smooth transition away from it. It's just clean transition from sort of this motion out here to what we've got going on here, and then these curves work together well. It's sort of kind of the same sort of stuff that we had before earlier. I think I remember talking about it, and it's kind of just because this part of the first yellow curve is being blanketed by this. And then they're also just on an angle with each other. This just looks nice. I'm not sure how to explain curves really well, but it looks good. If it looks good, then it looks good. And more axes. I love axes. Everything's based off of axes. And then again, transition from that yellow line to a nice little curve that leads away from it, and then a nice little circle. Yeah. Hope that helped. And that's it, I guess.